We are live. This is Literary Roadhouse, one short story once a week. I'm Anais.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Andy.
And this week we're discussing The Palm Tree Bandit by Nnedi Okorafor. If you don't want to get spoiled, go read the story. It's super short. It's less than 2,000 words, and then come back. Or get spoiled. That's also an option. So, in The Palm Tree Bandit, an unnamed narrator tells the story of Yaya to Yaya's great-granddaughter as the narrator braids the girl's hair. In the story of Yaya, Yaya defies her village's expectations by secretly climbing the palm tree on a moonless night to collect palm tree wine. She carves a symbol for woman and mother into the palm tree for the village to discover during the day. Women are forbidden from climbing palm trees, so there's a lot of to-do about this, and the village elder, Old Man Rumcake, is vexed by the situation. She repeats the secret climb a month later and a month after that. The men of the village hold on to their agitation a bit longer than the women, who begin to welcome the stories with a sly smile. After the third climb, when Yaya almost gets caught, she returns home to find a jug of palm wine waiting for her at the foot of her bed. It is the sweetest wine she's ever tasted, and in the morning her husband and colleagues can smell the sweetness on her but say nothing. Her story gets a name, The Palm Tree Bandit, a local legend. A woman said to have powers climbs palm trees and solves the problems of women who pray to her. Eventually, only Old Man Rumcake is annoyed by the Palm Tree Bandit. The rest of the village, men and women alike, have moved on, and on the next moonless night, Yaya decides not to climb a tree and snuggles her husband instead. All right.
Yay. Old Man Rumcake, what a name.
Yeah.
He's my hero.
And that name's a bit of a clue into sort of like the style and like the genre. So I was doing a little bit of research into Nnedi Okorafor, and she writes a lot of fantasy type stuff, but she writes both for children and adults and everything in between, young adults. So there is a bit of like a children's writing quality to this, right? Like a little bit like Old Man Rumcake kind of names, and the way that it's like an older woman telling the girl to stop fidgeting as she's like braiding her hair and telling her this story. It's not our usual like very adult fare.
Yeah. No, it's I didn't know there was a question there. It was it was it's not the sort of thing I would normally enjoy. I'm not a fantasy kind of guy. And certainly not sort of children's, but actually it's when you read it a couple of times, there's a bit more to it. It's a very satisfying story, and as a parent, you always have talked to your child. You always tell them a little story about something, an animal or something like that. So it's a great way of a sort of telling the foreground story of somebody telling a story to a child, but also the background story of women in general. So yeah, I quite enjoyed it.
Andy?
Well, it was certainly fun to read, and I liked the little cutaways to scolding the little girl, and it kind of kept the tone for the story. It's like, yeah, this is the kind of story you'd tell a kid. And it reminded you that every once in a while by braiding this girl's hair or having her sit still. I kept trying to look for more stuff going on that I didn't quite find. So I was like, oh, this is there's the red oily footprints. Does that mean something? And I was like, palm trees just have red fruit. It's just red. It's just footprints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, so your sort of tone a little bit, I think it's kind of where I'm coming at, where it's like, it's a very well constructed story. She doesn't always belabor the point. Like in the end, like at the very end, when Yaya decides not to climb the tree on the fourth moonless night and is content to just snuggle her husband, there's that feeling of like, she proved her point. Society's mind has changed in this village. She doesn't have to keep proving it. Now there's choices that are open to her. And with the red footprints, the idea of like copycats, like other people being emboldened, other women, right? So there's all these little things where she doesn't spell it out like, and now Yaya doesn't have to do this anymore, right? So that like there's that, right, which is nice. But I guess it's just like, as I was saying, it's like a slightly more like like it's written with a more like childlike audience in mind. So I'm not really the right audience for this in a way. Not that I think it's bad, not that I was bored. It's just not the kind of thing that I'm going to take to the rooftops and say everyone must read this. You know what I mean? Like I don't dislike anything about it, but it's also not like, you know, grabbing me in a way that something else that was intended for someone more like me might.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's a pleasant enough story. It was an interesting story. It was an entertaining story, and yet at the end of it, it's just a little story. It's kind of hard to, like you say, it's kind of hard to sort of drum up too much enthusiasm for this story because even the subtext is really on the surface too. You don't have to dig too deep and try and make connections below the level. It's all pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as I was finishing up, I was like, okay, that was a really good story. It's definitely not what I'm still going to be thinking about next week. So.
Right. And, you know, zooming out from our experience as a reader, if you zoom out now to the meta around this story, it's a very well-known African author who does a lot of children's books. And the fact that, so it's you know, fairy tale-esque, it's a different setting, it's palm wine, all of that's really important for getting different settings, different kinds of people. Because like it goes into a lot of detail about the thickness of her hair and the curls and like the fro that Yaya had and everything like that, like, you know, pro natural hair, everything like that. It's like from a very meta perspective, it's one of those stories where like, I'm really glad that this exists, right? Like this is like important to, because you can tell the story in a very Western context, but she didn't. It's in a very African context. And that's a good thing.
One thing, can you really get wine out of a tree?
Yeah, palm wine exists. That's a real thing. It's from the sap.
Oh, really?
I've had palm wine.
I mean,
super sweet.
You can get wine out of anything if you ferment it, right?
Yeah, but I think palm wine ferments like within hours or something.
Oh, well, that's crazy town.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's like beer level of alcohol content. Like it's not super strong. Like it's not like a hard liquor or anything. But yeah. They think it's one of the oldest wines for that reason. It's super easy and quick to ferment. And palm trees are everywhere. So, you know, in the tropical regions. Yeah. Where we started as a humanity. So that's why they think it's one of the older ones.
Yeah, they never mentioned, but I suppose I don't read it literally, Gerald. It's I suppose they climbing the tree and getting the wine. It's not literally the wine. It's the juice, the sap, or whatever, and then you can then make wine from it rather than it's literally wine out of the tree directly.
Actually, so I looked up a little bit because I've had palm wine, but I was like, how long? Because I had the same question. Like, wait, you just put it in a jug and it's good to go. I looked it up, like for like the basic palm wine that you're not gonna like bottle and ship and sell, like just like fresh from the tree. You do just pull out the sap. It looks milky, and you just wait a little bit, and it ferments quickly. There are no other ingredients. It's just the sap. Yeah.
Wow.
Like it's not the stuff you get when you get it bottled, which has some like processing to give it a longer shelf life. But yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's why they think it's one of the oldest wines. You just take the sap and you just wait, and then you have wine. So.
It's like a miracle.
Yeah, and it's like super milky in the way that it looks.
Okay.
Yeah. So hey, there we go. This conversation already. Why it's important to have stories in an African setting. Gerald, Englishman, has never had to think about palm wine. Never had to be. Oh, that's an interesting thing that you know now.
That's brilliant. My knowledge has increased.
There's another
good.
Yeah, exactly. Just like that, like cross-pollination of, you know, cultures and foods and everything like that is important.
No, that's good. Good.
So we've already said the story is kind of on the surface, but we haven't said what it is. So what is the story about? I don't know who wants to take
it. I suppose it's base level. It's about female empowerment. It's about women not doing what the men tell them to, or tell them what they should be doing. So through this one act, or this few acts by this one woman who's painted, and it's said that she's a great arguer. And she writes for the newspaper. So she's an intelligent woman, So she's already sort of, it like sets the level for her, and then she does this act of almost rebellion, I suspect, and does it a few times, and women see that nothing bad comes of it, and think, well, we can do this too. So yeah, something like that, I think.
Yeah. Would you add anything to that, Andy?
Just that I think it's important, but by the end, the sort of the mythical figure, the palm tree bandit, rather than Yaya herself, becomes like a female hero god, right? Like they make shrines to her.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah. That is. I didn't think about that, but yeah, it's like the creation of a new like minor deity who is there for the furtherance of women empowerment. And also the way she looks is kind of intense. Like she's shiny from all the palm oil, and like she's like of the trees. There's a cool wildness to it.
And she smells sweet. So surely everybody knows. Her husband must know. She's the.
Yeah, that's the sense I got as well. And again, this story is very. It does that thing that a lot of stories that are sometimes written with a younger audience in mind, not necessarily like this is only for younger people, but just like clearly it has to be accessible to younger people. You don't beat them over the head with, and everybody knew it was Yaya, but there's enough clues where like you can safely assume it was Yaya, and it's like a good way, I think, for kids to think about literature. And for adults, there's just enough depth as well where you don't feel like you've been beaten over the head.
Yeah, I think that's quite good, and I think it will also help children to sort of look beyond the surface of the story and a child and braiding the hair and listening to the story that's being told. And I think they could pretty soon get that, and the fact that other women bring her a jug of the wine when she doesn't go out and do it. So everybody knows it's her, but they just they don't make a big deal out of it. So I think there's a good enough story, behind the story for the kids.
Yeah, and as we said, it's entertaining. At no point was I bored reading it.
True.
Yeah. So we've been talking about how like the narrative style is like for kids, and it's someone like I guess we've already discussed this. But one of my questions was like, Andy said you liked it. You liked the framing device of having someone constantly jerk back to like the present of the kid fidgeting in the chair. Do you think the story would have been better or more adult had it been a different framing device? Just thinking about like different options that an author has in crafting a story. So if an author who wasn't Okorafor, just someone else, wanted a story about this palm tree bandit type woman, but it's not fairy tale-esque, would you have enjoyed it more if it was just like, from Yaya's perspective, maybe?
I don't know that I would have enjoyed it more, but you could certainly set the same story without those callbacks to the kid getting her hair braided or combed or worked on. Haired, I think, is the technical term.
Yeah. Braided, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell the same story. You could set it differently. You'd focus, and then maybe there it would be some sort of deeper metaphor, right? If you're writing the story just about Yaya as she does it, and then maybe everything is standing in for complex political machinations. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think if you were to tell it in a more straightforward way, without it being a story being told to a young child, I think you would then have to make it a bit deeper, a bit more metaphorical, and I think it's I don't know if you could really do that. I think you'd have to work pretty hard, but I think it works as it is. I think it's a perfect device to get across that story. I thought that was really good.
So it's almost like what you're saying. Is when it's this more sort of it's not really a parable, but like this like fairy tale type thing that's focused on a younger audience. This framing device is perfect for setting the expectations for the reader of what this is. That if it had been like omniscient third person or something, it would feel hollow in a way that it doesn't with this framing device, because it sets the reader's expectations.
I think so, and I think you're sort of you're viewing it through the perspective of it being a story being told to a child. So I think you're giving it a bit of a pass, really, that you can, it can be a simpler story, but in that context, it works really well because it's being told to a child. So I think that's really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like the film, The Princess Bride. If you don't have Columbo telling a story to the kid from the Wonder Years, a lot of the movie really just falls apart.
Yeah. It's just an interesting thing to think about, because we have a lot of listeners who are aspiring writers, and we don't really talk too much, or we haven't in recent years talked about the framing device too much. But in this story, it very clearly is doing something important, because if it had been your typical close third-person point of view that we're used to in modern times, we might have very quickly have been like, this was not enough meat, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. Yes, it's it's good.
Yeah. But we're already sort of winding down. That's the problem with these kinds of stories, where it's like it's a new fairy tale, which is fun. We always think of fairy tales as being something in the past that's a part of our history. We can make new fairy tales. Here's a new fairy tale. Here's a new African fairy tale. But I don't know what more to say.
I know,
Well,
it's hard, isn't it? It's a shame.
Do we think there's anything to the little girl being the fourth to carry the Yaya name, or is that just oh yeah, she was a real important person, so named the daughters after her, right? Or is that some sort of callback to her mythic status as the Palm Tree Bandit?
I don't know.
No, me.
Yeah. She's like descended from a minor god, basically,
Right.
in this village.
Yeah.
And I didn't get the sense that this village was like in the olden days. There's a few references that
she's
made
a
it modern.
journalist. Like, that's not
Right. Which I like, right? Every time it's like, we're used to fairy tales being like in the times of castles, right? And this is not the time of castles. The time of castles, we're not pro-journalists.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I think maybe it just I wonder if maybe then her fidgetiness is like how she is a descendant from Yaya, who was also sort of fidgety and restless, like maybe just that trait getting passed down.
And they had the same hair too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was how the story started. Yeah, talking about the hair. That's also just fun.
Yeah, I didn't see that. It may be, but certainly the fidgeting, I think, is just, because kids do, and I think kids, when you're doing anything with their hair, they're sort of not that keen on they hate having it cut and stuff like that. So I think she's just fidgety, and she tells her the story to quieten her down and help her listen.
Yeah, but there's also a way in which in families you're constantly trying to tie back kids' behavior to the previous generations. Because there's also kids who are like very vain from a young age and love it and like can't wait to have their braids done, right? And are patient for it. It depends on the kid a little bit. Most kids probably are impatient. But I'm just thinking how in my family, when I was growing up, everyone was like how behavior-wise, I was so much like my mom's first cousin, Elena. And now her kid, Emma, everyone's like, oh, she's so much like Anais. And it's just like, now it becomes a part of the mythos of my mom's side of the family, where there's this sort of like weaving of personalities, which is why I think, it would be a little bit like you are very much Yaya's great-granddaughter. It's coming across in her behavior a little bit.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. And mostly that behavior of my family that everyone's talking about, it's from a young age being very talkative, a little bossy, and a bit lawyerly, like wanting to debate all the time. So
really?
Yeah.
You can't imagine that.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah.
So should we rate it then?
Yeah, because there's not much more to say, really. I think we've done pretty well to investigate it this far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're doing 2 stories today. So after this recording, Charles and I are gonna hop on with Colette and discuss the bridegroom. The bridegroom was a dog by Yoko Tawada, the book club, and it's a novella. It's like less than 60 pages in the little book that I got, and it's also a fairy tale, modern
Yeah.
Japanese one. Yeah,
It's kind of funny as well.
Mm.
It's a weird thing.
Yeah, but that one's
yeah.
very adult. That one's erotic.
Is it ever?
It's all good fairy tales should be.
Well, maybe not like this. I don't think. To be honest,
No.
creepy in places. Right. So anyway, back to the thing. Rating. Yeah, good 4. Good 4.
Same 4.
Yeah, I am definitely in the 4 camp.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. And for people who are listening for the first time, we rate from 1 to 6, but over time it's really become 1 to 5, with anything above a 5, meaning you're super into it. Like that's kind of what it's become a little bit.
It is. It's. I mean, we do rate pretty carefully. We do think about it quite hard to give it a rating, not necessarily on how good we think it is as a standalone story, but how much we enjoyed it and how we enjoyed reading it, and how complete it was as a story. There's a real sort of composite marking system, and we work on that pretty hard.
Yeah.
We don't just come up with numbers,
Yeah. And at one point we had wanted to publish the rating next to each story, but I'm glad we don't, because then people might just be like, oh, I only want to read the 5s and 6s. And it's like, you learn so much also from the lower ratings as well.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's always kind of interesting to look at the whole breadth of the scores and see why we think certain stories are fantastic 6s and why some are sort of mediocre and why some are really poor. And there's no hard and fast rules. We don't use a marking template or a spreadsheet or anything. It's just how we feel about the story. And quite often in discussion, the marking that we start at, the score we start off with, it does change as we discuss the story, and how it changes how much we feel about it. So discussing literature is a very important thing, kids.
Wait, so am I the only one with a spreadsheet?
You have a spreadsheet?
No, he doesn't.
He might. I wouldn't put it past him. Maybe.
I do not have a spreadsheet.
Actually, I was just thinking we shouldn't post what the average score is that we give it, but maybe we should post the spread between the highest and the lowest, because those shows are just arguments. And shows like this one where we all agree, where the spread is 0, we're all just like, yep, we all kind of say the same thing, We should do the spread. And on this show, someone came with a 6 and someone came in with a 0.5. It is a bloodbath. Enjoy.
Those are good shows.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Okay. So the game is super quick because I was losing my mind trying to find something better. So I've decided we're going to keep it simple. So palm wine can come from all kinds of different palm trees, whether it's a coconut palm tree or a date palm tree or different kinds, non-fruiting palm trees. But the coconut, it's actually only one kind of palm tree, according to Wikipedia. There's like thousands of different palm trees and only one produces the coconut that we can consume. Which is crazy to me. Yeah. But it's just very well cultivated. So how many... Oh, wait. What stories are you submitting? Look at that.
Well, I'm going the third time and out for 3 Friends in a Hammock by April Ayers Lawson. If this doesn't get through, I'm going to find something else.
That's just... I feel like there's no conceivable way for 3 friends to fit in one hammock. Like someone's going to tip the thing over. Just logistically, I've got a lot of problems with this story, having never read it.
Of course you have. Yes. So we need to read it, obviously.
just to solve. I am submitting Medusa by Pat Barker.
Okay.
Ooh.
So it's one question. The answer is a number, and it's whoever gets closest. I was going to make it close without going over, but no, closest. So how many coconuts can a well-cultivated palm tree produce in a year on average?
Whoa. Picturing it in my head. Okay, I'll go first.
Mhm.
73.
Okay.
I think a coconut, there's 4 coconuts on a tree, and they take a month to grow. So 48.
Gerald is closest. The average was 75. So
Wow.
that was insane.
Wow. That is insane. I was just picturing it in my head. I was counting them. Yeah, that's about
Gerald went from not knowing much about palm trees, palm wine, to being an expert.
I am the expert.
Only on the coconut cultivar, though.
Yeah. I didn't. Okay. So, Gerald, what are we reading next week?
So next week we are reading Three Friends in a Hammock by April Ayres Lawson, and we're going to be answering Andy's question.
Okay.
How big is this hammock?
Guys,
You find out. Sorry.
I was going to say, I forgot to prepare an outro, so I'm going to try to do one freestyle. Let's see how
Wow.
this goes. All right. So, but before you go, climb our comment section at our Facebook group, the Literary Roadhouse Readers, or Twitter at Lit Roadhouse, or our website, literaryroadhouse.com, and leave your thoughts on this story there. Wish you could spend more time with minor deities and other fairy tale-like creatures? Of course you do. Join the Literary Roadhouse book club, where we discuss a novel each month. And lastly, this story is going to make us we have to order a case of palm wine. Gerald has to try it. So please support our palm wine expenses and podcast expenses at patreon.com/literary roadhouse. Every bit helps. And as always, share this podcast with a great grandmother who became a local legend. Until next time, read a good story.
Very good.